what a first day to the convention. What did you experience?
Yeah, it was certainly a first day. I can say that. And good morning to you all there in the Bay Area. My initial experience in NABJ, as many of you may know, this is one of the largest NABJs they've had in history. So you have about over 4,000 journalists from across the United States that are here at the Chicago Hilton. When I arrived with just minutes to spare before the actual panel discussion started, there were hundreds of protesters outside of the Chicago Hilton, all around the building. Then you had to go through Secret Service screening just to be able to get inside. Once you were inside, I would say before the panel started, there was a lot of anxiety from the journalists that were there in the room. They did not really know what to anticipate. We found out pretty last minute that the former president was going to be addressing the audience of journalists there. So you had a lot of conversations of people just not knowing what to expect initially.
So, I mean, I'm just wondering what the room was like when Trump started talking and saying these various things that were quite surprising or extreme.
I mean, it started out hostile from the get-go.
So, yeah, like, was there a hush? Was everybody, you know, cheering, booing, raising their hands? How did the journalists handle this?
Absolutely. So when they started the panel discussion, the first journalist to ask the former president questions was ABC correspondent Rachel Scott. And immediately, the former president did not like her line of questioning that she had for him. He described her comments as being hostile and nasty. As soon as that discussion started off, everybody in the room in total, utter shock. You heard people gasping, and it kind of continued to snowball from there in terms of you had Harris Faulkner from Fox asking questions. So there was not much recovery after that initial line of questioning.
It's interesting watching it, because I watched it live too, obviously from here, and I heard at times grumbling, gasping, as you mentioned. I also heard cheering at times as well to some of what he said. It seemed like there was a mix of emotions going on there amongst the audience.
You know, a lot of that cheering that you heard in the audience from me being there was a lot of laughter from the people in the audience. I think from a lot of the journalists that I talked to, they could not believe some of the things that were being said there. There was also supposed to be real-time fact-checking on the screen while this panel discussion was going on. That did not happen. So there were a lot of people that were upset by that. And there were a lot of people that were upset that a lot of the conversation kind of went on unchecked.
Yeah. Did any other answers and anything else Trump had to say take you by surprise?
You know, I talked to some journalists there, and the consensus or three big takeaways that the journalists expressed to me. A lot of them said they were disappointed. They were disappointed that both candidates were not present. They really thought that it would have been a more balanced discussion if the vice president, Kamala Harris, was in attendance there. The second thing they felt like, they felt that he avoided a lot of the questions that were asked of him, and that meaningful dialogue was not able to take place. You know, the purpose of NABJ is to create a safe space for not only Black journalists, but the African-American communities that these thousands of journalists represent by bringing their voices. So they felt a lot of the issues weren't asked in terms of representation. And then the last thing, a lot of the journalists expressed to me, they felt that the remarks that were made about the former vice president, Kamala Harris, in terms of her relationship to Blackness was disrespectful. They also felt that the Black women on the stage that were asking the questions of the president, that they were addressed in a disrespectful manner. So those are the three big conversations that I took away from talking to the journalists that were present there.
Yeah, so I mean, I just wonder how it's going to play. Like, he went there to try to obviously woo voters, and do you think it's going to turn more people off or on? And he'll...
Yeah, I don't know if he achieved that goal.
You know what? Only time will tell. We'll see how people show up at the polls. I know the purpose of the conversation was supposed to focus on critical issues that are impacting the Black communities And in not any of the headlines that we're seeing across the United States and the world, none of those Black issues are being spotlighted in this.
Well, maybe
So,
maybe he's, you know, the headlines were stolen by the radical stuff that he said that was so offensive. What about issues? Did you hear him address any issues that are important to the community?
you know, he did briefly talk about HBCUs, so historically Black colleges. He said that he has donated to historically Black colleges when nobody else would. So that's a big issue. He also addressed, I know if you guys are familiar with his infamous debate where he talked about Black jobs. He defined Black jobs for us at the convention. He said that Black jobs were jobs that anybody could hold. So those were two things that were talked about. He also talked about inflation as a whole and his desire to bring inflation down. So those were some main takeaways and some points that he was able to get out and address while he was there.
Right.
Well, it's kind of, you brought up that, you know, his phrasage using or saying Black jobs. As you were there, you saw he brought that up in the context of, you know, really pushing the, quote, invasion of illegal immigrants, which he's really pushing on the campaign trail, telling the audience there that these immigrants are coming in and stealing Black jobs. And the moderators pressed him, what do you mean by Black jobs? And he had, well, jobs that anybody could hold. He kind of stumbled around that a little bit. I know the moderators really wanted to press him. What exactly are you meaning by Black jobs?
Right, exactly. So I know from the journalists that I got a chance to talk to there, just said they felt like it was really his time to be able to take the issues that are facing the Black communities. We talk about education, we talk about crime in our communities, we talk about the lack of resources, wealth within the nation, and they felt like it was a missed opportunity for him to be able to engage in a meaningful way. And that's what I took away from the people that I was able to talk about at the convention yesterday.
All right. A lot of great information and a good perspective. Thank you so much, Reyna.
Absolutely.